This podcast episode is sponsored by Geekdom, San Antonio's entrepreneurship hotspot and co-working space. Whether you need one-time recurring office space or event space, Geekdom has it all. Use code SOCIALBUTTERFLY when signing up for a membership to receive $25 off of monthly membership. Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high-achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best-kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award-winning leadership and visibility coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. I'm celebrating 11 years in business this week. Woo! On May 26, 2026, I will be celebrating 11 years of full-time entrepreneurship, which honestly feels surreal to say out loud. I felt like last year when I hit the coveted 10-year decade mark, I really couldn't fully celebrate it because I was in such a critical state of burnout and just trying to push through the 2025 HNS conference. And so I feel like now, a year later of navigating the most craziest year of business that I could have possibly ever imagined, it feels super surreal to actually say out loud that it is 11 years. And there's a version of me from 2015 who would look at my life and business right now and probably think like, wow, look at you, girl. I can just think about my 24-year-old self right now, just thinking about the accolades, the awards that I've won, the media features, the visibility, the speaking, the community, the conferences, the relationships, this podcast, the business that I have built. And yet what I know now at 35 years old that I did not understand at 24 years old is that external success and internal stability are not always the same thing. A business can look incredibly successful publicly while quietly becoming unsustainable privately. And I think that's one of the most important conversations that I have had to have with myself over the last couple of years, and especially in the last, I would say, year. A big thing that we do not talk about in business is grief. And there is a specific type of grief that comes with becoming really successful at something. And then through your evolution, realizing that there are parts of what made you successful, there are also many things that you realize that are actually disconnecting you from yourself. The internet loves certainty. It loves clean narratives. It really loves the underdog before and after stories where everything compounds upward, right? There's this stream of upwardness. Every expansion is framed as proof that you are aligned and abundant, healed, successful, playing bigger. And if I'm honest with you, like really, really honest, after 11 years in business, I no longer believe a lot of the advice that built modern entrepreneurial culture. Because some of the business advice that I followed for many, many years, while it did help me grow, it taught me to override myself. I think about how there was many years where I was disconnected from my own rhythm. It also kind of led me to keep expanding long after something no longer felt aligned, to keep saying yes to all of these opportunities that looked impressive on paper, but were quietly hurting me internally, to equate visibility with worth, to equate exhaustion with my ambition, and to equate pressure with success. I know I'm not the only woman that is carrying that right now, especially the women that are listening to this who have already hit those six-figure or multi-six-figure business markers, or who are established and are now going into 5+ beyond years. Privately, you may be feeling very tired of carrying a version of success that no longer fully reflects who you've become. And so today, that is exactly what we're going to celebrate. We are going to talk about the business advice that I no longer believe after 11 years in business. And I want to remind you that this is coming from my own lived experience. My own business is my case study in my coaching and my frameworks and how I have been able to apply my own frameworks into my own business. So, my hope is that you take what resonates and leave what does not, but also gain some wisdom from the lessons that I have learned throughout the 11 years in business, and also see this beautiful body of work as the official case study as to my own coaching. So, one of the first things that I no longer believe anymore is that more visibility automatically equals more growth. This one is extremely personal for me because, yes, visibility built my career. In fact, it's one of the intersections that I coach on. It's one of the very things that I really work so heavily on with my clients. So you might be thinking like, well, what, Christina, what do you mean? Like visibility, isn't that supposed to be the reason why we grow? Because we all want to be more visible. And that's where I want to stop you right there, because I feel like for me, somewhere along the way, started to confuse visibility with translation. So what I mean by that is just because people knew my name didn't automatically mean that my authority was calibrated. And just because opportunities kept coming in didn't mean that those opportunities were super aligned. And I had to learn that the hard way because there were many seasons where I was incredibly visible and very exhausted. I remember there was a moment in late 2023 where my visibility was on high. I was getting opportunity, saying yes to everything. And on the internet, it looked like momentum, right? But some of those opportunities, I was overriding my own decision making, especially with being compensated. I felt like I was doing things for vanity to be able to be seen as this individual who has all the things. And I feel like those were the really tough seasons where internally I was carrying immense pressure to try to sustain it all. There were many seasons where I was getting invited to speak at incredible conferences, to be in specific rooms, to collaborate and to have all these partnerships. And what I started to realize over the last few years is that visibility without discernment becomes the emotional labor. And especially for Latina founders, we are naturally relational and very emotionally intelligent, but also very deeply committed to people. I think one of the things that I had to learn so much to put at a forefront was the boundaries that I was creating. I am very deeply embedded with my community. I believe in my community. I am such a giver, but being a giver really hurt me in a way that I had to relearn that it is okay to ask for the type of compensation that you really want to have. Because anytime I speak with any Latina founder, when we think about charging what we're worth or just charging in general, many of the women that I speak with are very scared about putting a dollar amount to anything that has to deal with community, because we want to do this for the community. We want to give, we want to impact our community. But at the same time, it is not selfish to put our own needs first, because of the fact that if the person that is giving and giving and giving is not able to receive, then what is that doing for our community? How does it make me a better founder, a better businesswoman, a better leader if I cannot sustain myself? If I cannot sustain my livelihood, if I cannot sustain the growth of my business? And those are things that I really had to confront, that I feel like it changed everything for me, because the internet and even people in our own community will tell you, oh my goodness, more visibility equals more opportunity. But nobody talks enough about whether your nervous system, your business model, your marriage, your finances, your energy, your future family, or the actual life that you are living can be sustainable and hold the level of visibility that you're chasing. I feel like that's what changed everything for me, because I started asking myself, what is the point of being publicly admired if privately I feel super disconnected to myself. I feel super disconnected to the way that I was holding my business at a certain standard. What is the point of constant expansion if my business requires me to abandon my body, my health, my peace, my financial stability, my relationships, or long-term stability in order to be able to sustain it? I feel like this is where a lot of high achieving women are right now. Many of you are exhausted from carrying a business model that's built around over functioning and giving, especially in the name of community. And so I feel like that is something that I had to confront in the last year was, what does it look like to not give as much as I normally would and be able to take a step back, to pause and readjust and realign myself to be able to receive. And I feel receiving is such a hard thing for givers. We do not know how to just sit and allow for the abundance to be open to receiving because we are so used to overfunctioning. We're so used to giving and giving and giving. And I feel like that's something that I've had to learn in the last year, was to actually remind myself that just because I'm very visible doesn't mean that my visibility and those opportunities are super aligned with me. And I've retreated. I've pulled back from a lot of things, from attending a lot of events to making myself available, to putting more boundaries around my time and my energy and my finances, because it really was hurting me in the long run. So another piece of advice that I no longer believe is that bigger rooms automatically mean bigger opportunities. Whew! This one has taken me years to unlearn because proximity culture is incredibly seductive. I mean, there are so many messages on the internet. I hear this from my colleagues. I hear this from other women's groups. Like, proximity is key. Get yourself in the room. Proximity is everything. And yes, don't get me wrong. There are moments where if you get into the right room and if you meet the right person, if you're seen by the right audience, if you're in the right mastermind, if you meet the right coach, you get invited to the right stage. Yes, things can change. I'm not going to sit back and say like, oh yeah, proximity is not everything. Absolutely. I fully believe that it's really important to be in proximity to those people in those rooms that you desperately feel like you need to have. But I feel like what I've learned after 11 years is that access without alignment can actually become incredibly expensive. When I think not just financially, but emotionally, energetically, relationally, there were rooms where I fought to get in years ago. And now I realize that they were never actually designed for the life that I want to live long term. Or there were rooms where I was surrounded by people that I felt just didn't have my best interests in mind. And I think that's the hard realization when you've spent years believing, okay, if I can just get in that room, if I could just get to that person's proximity, if I could just get into blah, 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 I will finally feel successful. I will never forget all of the coffee meetings and the lunch meetings that went nowhere. Not because I didn't do anything. I would always follow up as much as I could, but they went nowhere because going back to being a giver, so many people really wanted access to me. And when it came time to it, when I would have those lunch meetings or have those coffee meetings, and I actually put a boundary of compensation or access to my time and my energy, you could see that a lot of those people that I was in close proximity to felt threatened because of those boundaries. And I feel like for me, I always believe like if I can just get into that room, if I could just get in front of that person, I'm going to feel successful. Okay, but what happens when you actually get there and you still don't feel safe? What happens when you get there and your business still feels unstable? Because that has happened to me before. I've been in a room with incredibly powerful bankers who have given me money, who have sponsored my events, and my business still was unstable. Myself was unstable. What happens when you actually get there and you realize that you've built an identity around being so validated by the pressures and impressive on paper, but you're not sustainable? That is a very different conversation. And I feel part of my evolution over the last couple of years has been accepting that I no longer want a business that only looks powerful from the outside. I don't want to be in close proximity to people who just expect me to give and give and give all of the time. I also don't want to be in proximity to people who do not have my best interests in mind, who just want me there at the table to make them look and feel good. I want a business and I want supportive, strategic partners that support me in real life through all of the evolution of Christina, not just the one that's on top, but the one that is rock bottom. I want a business that supports my life as a future mom, my marriage as it continues to grow, my health, my peace, my nervous system, my leadership, my longevity. And honestly, that has required grieving versions of ambition that I used to worship. Holy moly. I feel like that's probably the biggest one because there's been a lot of times over the last year where I've looked back and said, like, oh my goodness, Christina at 27 would be questioning Christina right now at 35 because does that make her feel less ambitious that she doesn't want to be doing XYZ? And that has been such a weird thing to be in because I feel like you kind of equate it as, am I losing parts of my spark? Am I losing myself? I hear that a lot from women as well. And we have to always remember we are evolving at a fast pace. What we thought we wanted at maybe 25, 27, 30, maybe even last year it's might be something that we don't want right now. And I do feel like I am really in that stage of grieving that version of ambition and asking myself really deeper questions of what does ambition look like at a different space where I feel more stable, I feel more sustainable, I feel more peace, I feel more joy, I feel more flow, if you will. I also no longer believe that revenue growth automatically means that your business is healthy. That's a big one. The internet really loves to harp on that more revenue, six-figure revenue, multi-six-figure revenue, seven-figure, eight-figure. The internet really loves those launch numbers and the optics. But I think one of the biggest realizations that I've had was I was speaking to a business owner that I really admire. She's a deep, friendly colleague of mine. And on the internet, you hear all those messages around, these revenue numbers. She never revealed her profit. And then she actually revealed something to me that I was like, wow. She revealed that she hasn't turned a profit in a long time, that she had to obtain a loan to be able to sustain her business and to be able to have more, to be able to do more. And I think that just really made me realize like a lot of the bullshit that you hear on the internet is fake as fuck. And it's so important that we remember that because there is so many messages out there about revenue. And we think that having incredible revenue growth is going to mean that your business is healthy. But when you really look under the hood, when you look at profitability, when you look at sustainability, when you look at all of the things of growing wealth, revenue is just a little number. It doesn't equate to a healthy business or a healthy life. I feel like that was one of the hardest things that I've had to admit to myself is that for me, there were years in my business where externally things look really successful, but internally they were not sustainable. I had one of the highest revenue grossing periods of my life. Maybe there was like this era where everything was growing, but my nervous system was unable to handle that growth. I almost feel like I self-sabotaged myself when it came to being able to hold because that was probably the biggest amount of money that I've ever had in my business at that time. And I was so afraid of what happens if I lose it. And it was just kind of funny that the universe worked in that way where literally a couple of like 6 months to a year later, I was navigating what it looked like to not have stability and being in a financial hardship time frame where I was really questioning all of the things that I was doing. I think that's really important to say out loud because I know that you are listening right now and you secretly feel ashamed that your business success does not emotionally feel the way that you thought that it would. You thought that maybe having a bigger year would make you feel safe. Maybe you thought that expansion is going to make you feel calmer, or that visibility would make you feel more secure, or that opportunities would finally quiet your anxiety. And instead, you became responsible for retaining more and maintaining more. More people, pressure, visibility, expectations, emotional labor, overhead, and complexity. For me personally, I've had to become radically honest about the difference between growth and healthy growth and the type of business that I actually want for my life. You always hear what growth and expansion would look like if you add more people to your team. It seemed very sexy to hear so many business owners be like, in a season of growth. I'm adding more to my team. But baby, if you have a hard time managing people and you have a hard time with conflict and team management and understanding how to be a leader to a team, why the hell would you want that? And I've had to confront that because when I thought about expansion, I thought about, oh my goodness, I want to have, X amount of clients and X amount of team members. But then when I actually finally managed to manage a team, that was hard. That was rough. That was not something that I was prepared for when it came to growth. And when you think about growth and healthy growth, they are not the same thing. Healthy growth should not require chronic self-betrayal to sustain it. Healthy growth should not require you to constantly override your intuition or put you in extreme exhaustion or require you to prove what you're worth. And I feel like a part of me turning 35 has been realizing that younger Christina thought the goal was expansion, that the goal was going to be this, big business. And that's a completely different philosophy that I have now at 35 versus, in the early days, like 24, 25, etc. I'm no longer trying to build a business that impresses strangers on the internet or even my colleagues. I'm building a business that I can actually live inside of. And honestly, that shift has required more courage than expansion ever did. Because it's one thing to chase more, and it's another thing to actually slow down long enough to ask, what do I actually want my life to feel like? What do I want my business to feel like? How do I want to wake up in the morning? What is the work that I really want to do that would fulfill me? If I didn't have to do this, if nobody was watching, what would I do? Another thing that I no longer believe is this lie of I made it. That was actually my very first podcast episode here on Unapologetically Visible. I will link that episode in the show notes below, or you could always go back to episode number 1. And I talked about this in the episode where I feel like entrepreneurship sells this fantasy that eventually there is a point where you've made it. Everybody always talks about that. Like, when did you know that you made it? When did you feel like everything was arrived? Where suddenly everything feels sustainable or stable, certain, emotionally resolved. And after 11 years, I don't believe success works that way. I think what actually changes is your relationship to yourself, the relationship that you have with your self-trust and discernment and the way you make decisions, and your ability to hear your own voice over the collective noise. One of the biggest mistakes that I've made for years was outsourcing my self-trust to people that I perceived were successful. These could be colleagues, mentors, friends, etc. I really want you to hear me when I say this. Just because somebody is successful does not mean that they are aligned and that you are aligned with their version of success. Just because someone is super visible doesn't mean that their visibility is emotionally healthy. And just because somebody is wealthy does not mean that their business is actually sustainable. Just because you admire somebody doesn't mean that you should build your life and your business exactly like theirs. This became deeply important for me because I started realizing how much of modern business culture is built around that performance. It's performance-based visibility, performance-based leadership. And I feel like many high achieving women quietly lose themselves just trying to keep up with those different definitions of success that actually were never theirs to begin with. That realization really, really changed me because I started asking myself, what if peace is not laziness? And what if stability is not playing small? I actually don't believe in the phrase playing small because so many people have different versions or aspects of what success means. And who am I to tell anybody that they're playing small? Because maybe their small is actually their big. So I never believe in that phrase, you're playing small. I feel like asking myself deeper questions of what am I doing to actually create more steadier growth that actually creates a more powerful legacy than constant volume or expansion ever could. A lot of the questions that I've been asking more recently have changed the way that I lead now. And honestly, I think that's one of the most important things that I've had to learn on over the last couple of years, especially when it came to actually trusting myself again. Not the internet, not the algorithm, not the collective entrepreneurial culture, but really trusting myself, really leaning into my human design and my birth chart. Because there was a period where I became so disconnected from my own internal knowing that every decision felt super loaded. And I know I'm not alone in that. I know you have probably spent many years being the responsible one and the capable one. And eventually your body started asking you at what costs. That's the season that I've been in, total recalibration, a very deep recalibration around what kind of life do I actually want in my next decade in business? What kind of business can sustainably support the life that I do want? What level of visibility actually feels aligned and good in my body? What level of leadership feels super honest to myself and how I lead as a person? And what version of success still feels like me? I think that's why my work has evolved so much over the last 24 to 36 months, because the women who come to me now in coaching are really seeking exactly what I've been really building and recalibrating. And I feel like that's the work that I do now, not just helping women become more visible, but helping them become accurately visible to recalibrate the way that they are building their business, the way they are leading, so that their business is more sustainable in their growth versus the overfunctioning. So if you're listening to this episode right now, I want to coach you just for a few minutes. I really want you to sit with these questions honestly. What parts of your business are currently requiring self abandonment in order to sustain it? What parts of your business feel heavier than they should at your current level? Where are you still chasing externally rewarded expansion that your private life cannot sustainably hold? What version of success are you still trying to prove? And if no one online could judge your decisions, what would your life and business actually look like? I feel that's what these last 11 years have really taught me. Success is not becoming who the internet rewards the most. Success is becoming somebody you can actually stay connected to while building the business. I feel like that's the biggest lesson that I have. And honestly, I feel that's the greatest proof of my work. It's just not about perfection. It's the fact that I'm willing to tell the truth time after time after time. I stop hiding behind any externally impressive expansion. I reevaluate a lot of things. I rebuild from alignment to become more precise, more discerning, more sustainable, and more like myself. That is the work. And that's also why the women who hire me usually come to me during those transitions. So I want to invite you into my private coaching program. As we celebrate 11 years in business, I want nothing more than to be able to have the honor to change your life, to be able to recalibrate at the level that you are wanting to, because sometimes the most powerful thing a high level woman can do is stop trying to self-process every evolution alone. If that is something that you are really interested in pursuing, you can send me a DM on Instagram, or you can apply in the links below in the show notes. And honestly, I don't take this lightly. Thank you so much for being here with me over the last 11 years. If you're a real one, if you've been with me since 2015, when I was a blogger turning into a social media company, or if you've been here with me for the last couple of years, navigating through my business transitions between coaching and all the things, I am deeply, deeply honored that you are here with me in this ride, that you have supported me, referred me, worked with me. It is such an honor and a privilege to have you listen. And I'm just so thankful to you because you are what is keeping me going. You are keeping me sustainable. And my only wish right now is that you share my work with anybody who needs it, because we need to have more Latinas and women of color founders really being more unapologetic leaders. If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review, because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who are never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone you love who might be in need of a coach. And DM me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest reframe, your biggest breakthrough from today's conversation. And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and offers in the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I will personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step into this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for all the shares and reviews. Remember this, you didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.